Today we're going to take a look at my Gibson Les Paul Classic. We're going to see if it's any good. And this video isn't like a whole bunch of other videos out there where it's 7 minutes of talking and only 1 minute of playing. We're going to play this quite a bit. And I already have a whole bunch of videos on this channel about this guitar, but soon I'm going to do a comparison between the Gibson and the Epiphone version. We're definitely not going to be ignoring these here. I'm going to go over all of the different push-pulls just so you can kind of hear some basic examples of the differences. I'm also going to compare the coil taps here to a Fender single coil, a Gibson P90, and the Epiphone coil split. And as always, the signal chain is listed in the description down below along with the chapter markers. But that's enough talking. Let's get after it. So now that we've heard the metal sound sample, before we get into the rest of all the sound samples, you can't really do a review unless you talk about the specs. So I'm going to try to very quickly go over those for you here. So just like most other Les Pauls, we have a slab of mahogany with a carved maple top on top of it. The body is also bound. We have a mahogany slim tapered neck with a rosewood fretboard and acrylic trapezoid inlays. The neck is also bound with the little nubs on the fret ends. The Gibson logo is inlaid with the Les Paul model logo silkscreened, and of course it says Classic on the truss rod cover. We also have Grover Rotomatic tuners. As for pickups here, we have the 61R and 61T, which have been rebranded to the 60s burst buckers. And as I did state, we are going to go over the push pulls here. The sound samples are going to be after the 5 other sound samples. But we do have both volumes are coil tap rather than coil split. That basically changes the amount of the magnet that comes through, I believe. It sounds different than coil split. Then we have an out of phase switch, which only works in the middle position, although it does change the sound of the bridge and the neck ever so slightly, but doesn't really do, the whole out of phase thing unless it's in the middle position. And then we have basically it's like a hot wire to the bridge. So from the output of the guitar, basically it's just right up to the bridge without going through the tone circuitry or anything like that. It's just ever so slightly hotter. As for weight relief here, it's not a light Les Paul, but it is a little lighter than a full non-weight relief Les Paul, depending on the wood that was used. This is 9-hole weight relief, so there's like 9 different holes that are drilled in the slab of mahogany. This is also part of the modern series. That means that it has PCB connections rather than hand soldered and such. Does it really make a difference? Not really. It doesn't really change anything sound-wise. It's just a lot of people look at the PCB as being a cost saver and a little on the cheap side. And finally, we have the ABR1 bridge with a stop bar. But again, that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and listen to more sound samples. So now that we've heard the 5 sound samples, we do have to make some people happy here. So let's go ahead and listen to the bridge, the middle, and the neck in clean. Now personally, I find it a little more beneficial to hear it with a little bit of light drive or breakup. So let's hear the bridge, the middle, and the neck with that. And if you are curious here over what the difference is with the coil tapping, let's go ahead and listen to the bridge and then the neck position with it off and then on. Now let's switch this over to the middle position and we'll go ahead and hear the out of phase off and then the out of phase on. That was a little quackier, was it not? So the last thing I want to go over as far as the push-pulls would be the hardwire, the hot wire, the direct, as you would call it. So no matter what position you're in, if you pull that up, that push-pull, it will automatically go to the bridge, and it is a little hotter. That's basically all. It's just without the tone circuit. So you can somewhat hear it. What you do want to listen to is to when I go back and forth, you can hear it a little better. So you can hear that there's just a little more to the section where it's direct. So Gibson likes to say that when you have the coil tap engaged, it turns the humbucker into a P90. I'm going to put that to the test here. I do oftentimes wish that it was coil split rather than coil tapped, because I do find that there's a little more high end to the coil split over the coil tap, and I do find that it has this, sometimes it has this weird low mid, not always the most welcome low mid to the coil tap. So let's listen to the coil tap against a Fender single coil and then against a Gibson P90 with it, which is also a classic. And then we'll actually use the Epiphone, which is coil split. we've heard that, I'd like to actually grab a Fender that has an HSS setup, and I want to listen to the difference between the humbucker here, the humbucker on that, and then the coil tap, and then the coil split on it. So there you go, there are all of the different sound samples. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death with that, but it is at this point where I might bore you a little more, because I do want to talk about, you know, the overall question here for the video, and that is the Gibson Les Paul Classic any good? And to me, even though like I own this guitar, I'm obviously going to say yes. I think this is a fantastic guitar. I do oftentimes prefer the Les Paul Standard 50s or the 60s over the Classic. I just find that there's a little bit of a difference in feel, like the overall like resonance and such on the body. I find that there's a little more presence on those two guitars over the Classic. And even though that's the case for feel, it's sort of like a Martin D35 versus a D28, where the D35 has a little more resonance to it, where the D28 has a little more presence to it. I do often find, and it could be because the open coils here, but there's a little more bite as well in the Classic, especially in comparison to the 60s, which has the same pickups and same basically everything other than, you know, the weight relief. But I find that there's a little more bite with this over the 60s. And I find that it's just a little more pleasing to my body and to my hands when I'm playing it, just because of the overall presence that I'm feeling in the playing. But that doesn't mean that there's often times where I prefer the Classic over the Standards as well. This is an absolutely fantastic guitar to play. The 61R and 61T, which are now rebranded to the 60s humbucker, or the 60s burstbuckers, or the burstbucker tribute, I don't know, whatever they're calling it this week. These are fantastic pickups. They have a little more presence to them, a little hotter than, say, like the burstbucker 1, 2, or 3, which can be beneficial, even though I do prefer a little bit less of a hotter pickup. But for leads, this is a fantastic guitar, and I always find that if I'm going to be playing some really drop-heavy stuff, this is a great pairing along with a guitar that doesn't have as much bite in the pickups. But admittedly, I don't use the push-pulls. I don't think I use them on any of my Gibsons. I think that's just because it's coil tap rather than coil split. So it has, like I said, to me, it has that really weird low, mid sound to it, where generally for that, I'm looking for something with a little more high end to it, a little more high mids, where maybe, you know, not really shrill, but it's sort of like Strat Ice Picky, where I can just dial back the tone a little more and get a nice, you know, fresher, balanced sound to it. The out of phase switch, I just don't find myself using it very often. It is definitely a nice option to have, but it doesn't really come across that much. And as far as the hot wired or the direct bridge, that's something that I just don't find it works as a boost for me. That'd be something for a little more light drive to, you know, drive home the guitar a little more, I find, or like maybe, I hate saying it, but like an AC/DC type sound, that would maybe work a little better for it, but I don't find myself using it at all. So again, is this a good guitar? Yeah, this is a fantastic guitar. The nitro finish for me is just something on a Gibson I feel is definitely required. It's something that I would miss if it wasn't there. While I'm playing the Epiphone that I rented here, I'm always kind of you know, moving my thumb around to see if I can feel a little bit of that nitro. I mean, along with the fact that it's not as heavy a guitar, and the slim taper on here is more like a rounded profile, or a little slimmer rounded profile. I'm just finding it a little odd that I'm not playing this, and this is really what I prefer, which is probably why I own it. So it's a good guitar. I don't want to talk anymore. Thanks for watching.